and welcome to this year's 2021 Escape. For those of you who don't know me, I prefer to go by Mel instead of Melissa Landsberg because that's just a mouthful. I have now been with BBD for a better part of 5 years, and unfortunately, I cannot wear a t-shirt that states I'm older than the internet. I kind of came a little bit after, but I do feel like it is one of the greatest inventions of all time. It's something that has really kickstarted the fourth industrial revolution, and it's just a platform that has enabled us to stay connected, and it's also a great platform for knowledge sharing, which is what I'm hoping to do with you today. Another great invention that probably started the whole industrial evolution is trains. I don't know how many of you have actually had the pleasure to actually get on a train for luxury purposes. There's something so special about getting your pass, talking to the conductor, boarding the train, taking your seat, enjoying a cup of tea or a glass of wine, and staring out the window for a better view. And much like in software development, we experience the same thing. Our users board our trains, we as the developers make sure everything keeps running, and we have conductors to make sure everything runs smoothly. However, as you know, delivering something full steam ahead, it's very easy to get derailed. And that is why choosing the right sort of framework for your product or deliverable that you are trying to achieve is so vitally important. So on the screen, I have a quote from someone famous that states, "This is a quote, words full of wisdom that someone important said and can make the reader feel inspired." Anyone feeling a little bit inspired? No, not really, okay. So I feel like no one in this room cannot say that they do not have an inspiration or at very least a passion for technology. We tend to strive to feel inspired with the types of frameworks that we use, and we also want to try and inspire our users to choose us above all else. I believe it was Simon Sinek that said, "Working hard for something you hate is called stress, but working hard for something you love is called passion." So passion bleeds inspiration and vice versa. Now, if we take a look at the wonderful web tools available to us, especially in front-end development, we have the 3 most common component-based examples on the screen at the moment, which is React, Angular, and Vue.js. And then, of course, there's everything else JavaScript. Now, I know what you're thinking, yet another technical talk about yet another JavaScript framework. But bear with me, because this one is actually quite exciting. I kind of wondered how we got to this point. Many, many years ago, obviously before my time as well, we sought out to satisfy a need. It was a bit of a headache using pure vanilla JS to update something, to make it reusable. jQuery came along, but we didn't really get the whole component thing right there. In today's world, we're faced with component-driven technologies that enable us to keep things clean, make changes quickly, and work more efficiently. So even me, I was excited when I read about this guy. So even you is the creator of Vue.js. So his journey started at Google. He initially worked with AngularJS, and I guess he felt inspired one day. He extracted what he liked from Angular's declarative data binding, and he decided to create his very own framework. So I'm guessing he has quite the passion for technology to pull something like that off. However, he did not expect Vue.js to grow to the extent that it has. When asked in an interview what he likes most about software development, he had this to say. He said that it gives you the ability to just build something. You share it instantly with the world. You put it on the web and you get a URL. You can send it to anyone with a browser. I think I'm going to use this as my job description going forward. I have the ability, we all have the ability to just build something and share it instantly with the world. We put it on a URL. So please do remember to deploy. Otherwise, when you send localhost to someone, they're going to get greeted with the awkward dinosaur, and we don't necessarily want that. But there's something quite inspirational about being able to share something so instantaneously with the world that can make an impact or a difference and satisfy a need. But how exactly do these frameworks compare? Well, we know that in 2010, over and above the World Cup, AngularJS was released. So AngularJS uses, there's a little bit of a decoupling there. So we kind of separate our HTML from our behavior in the form of JavaScript code. And the biggest market examples of AngularJS is Google and Wix. Then in 2013, a year before I finished high school, React came along. And we know that the biggest market examples of this is Facebook. Now what React does is it combines our user interface with our behavior. So in other words, the same code I use to write my components is the same code used to dictate my behavior. Then in 2014, when I actually managed to finish high school, Vue.js came along. And we're currently sitting on version 3, which is quite interesting because if we look at Angular, Angular is currently sitting on version 12.1.4 and React is sitting on version 17.1.x, I think. But either which way, it's quite interesting to see that Vue.js has not really gone through such an evolutionary stage, even though there's only a year gap between React and Vue. So this kind of makes me wonder, which one is more stable and which one do I need to take into consideration consistently keeping up to date? So the biggest market examples of Vue is not only the Alibaba group, but also 9gag and Nintendo. Yeah. Okay. So if we take a deeper look at React, we know that it does one thing and it does it well. It's innovative and disruptive at the same time, and you have to have spare parts. So much like when using React, you need to make sure that you've got something waiting in the cockpit to do that tire change or to do that oil change. Then if we take a look at Angular, this bad boy comes out of the box fully equipped with all options. This is more part of the heavyweight category. It's slower at startup, but it is definitely more sustainable over time. And then Vue.js is accessible and easy to handle. Now, I don't think it is accessible as a 1965 Ford Mustang, but you get my point. Vue.js has got a much easier learning curve to it, especially if you have experience with the other two technologies, given that it's also component-based driven. So the fact that it is accessible, easy to handle, also gives me the ability to plug and play with any existing application. I can use Vue.js on top of anything that I might have existent at the moment. But why care about all these points? Why should we worry about this? Well, I think it comes down to 3 major points. We want to make sure that we deliver well. We want to make sure that we are learning as we are delivering. And we want to make sure that we are keeping up with the times. We all kind of see ourselves as being wizards or masters at our own craft. So we're quite picky when it comes to what is it that I'm putting in my toolbox or equipping my belt with. So as developers, we are creatures of habit. We don't necessarily like change unless we are forced to. It's very seldom that we would go and read up on a new framework or actually do something with it unless A, it's requested by client, or B, it's such a buzzword, we just want to know why no one is keeping quiet about this. So we want something that is fast and furious. We want something that is fast to integrate with, fast to production, and ferociously to market. We don't necessarily want our users furious at us, but we do want them ferociously interacting with our application. So they want something that is fresh and installable. Everything has got a native footprint when it comes to deving for the web space. It needs to be accessible on a mobile. So therefore, you need to make sure that you are working fast and ferociously to keep up with the times. Then we also want something that's easy to learn. We don't necessarily want to spend countless of hours reading up on something without actually knowing what's going on there, or reading through thousands of lines of code, or sitting with a debugger and then we just get annoyed and we just keep drinking coffee onto an open road to nowhere. Then we also want something that is safe and structured. When I think safe and structured, I tend to think family. But we also want our users to feel safe. Safe in choosing our technology, and we feel safe in terms of our career growth. This is not something that's going to make me irrelevant within the next 5 years. We also want code that is structured. We don't necessarily, I don't think anyone in this room likes dealing with boilerplating or spaghetti code in any way. So the biggest question whenever transitioning into a new framework is, what exactly is the learning curve going to be like? Well, if we take a look at React, you can pretty much get set up within the hour. They have a great getting started guide online, and you'll be having up and running with a little to-do app in no time. However, having more advanced features with my React app requires that I make use of third-party libraries, and this can be quite time-consuming. So the learning curve to React is not as steep, depending on the type of path that I'm willing to take with my application. Then if we take a look at Angular, Angular is way more tricky, considering that it is a full-blown solution. Mastering something like Angular requires that I know associated concepts like TypeScript, so the whole becomes a little bit deeper. However, if I want to understand how the front end works and integrates, Angular is a great starting point. It definitely pays dividends in that regard. Then if we take a look at Vue, it's a nice open road. It's accessible, there's familiarity with use, it's easy to handle, and I also get the great support that I do with my other two frameworks. I've got dev plugins to support myself while in Chrome, and I've got really cool extensions that I can use in VS Code to make it that much simpler. Another thing Vue.js offers me that React necessarily does not is that it has a really good online guide to make sure that I am in the correct guidelines, as well as using best practice. Because remember, just learning to use a particular framework doesn't necessarily mean that you are following the best practice of that framework. So if we take a look at how simple this actually could be, on the screen, I have a div. And on that div, I'm expecting a message with a button. And if I click the button, I want to reverse my message. Nothing too complex or complicated about that. Now, if I wanted to do this in React, we all know we would start with our headache of import statements. And I would then immediately start writing my function. And eventually, I would then render that on the DOM. Now, if I may turn your attention to line 8, you will see that I'm updating state in order to set my message, in order to reverse it. Now, if I were to take the same concept and do this in Vue.js, it would look like this. So again, within my template, I have my p tag that expects a message, and I have my button that should essentially reverse my message. So no weird import statements, but instead a script tag. I create a new instance of Vue, and I write my method. So one of the things that blew my mind when I started working with Vue.js is I didn't have to worry about state. All I needed to do was update the variable, and I got the exact same result. That was quite cool. Another thing I can notice from this is that I can immediately see there's some sort of structure to it. Template, script, and CSS at the bottom. Now, I didn't really add CSS to this because we're not worried about making it pretty at the moment. But it's immediately simpler to me, and I find it a little bit easier to read. So immediately that over sense of fear kind of goes away a little bit. So I think as developers, we all kind of go through this cycle. We feel inspired about something, and immediately we're passionate about it. Then we want to learn more about it because you've now sparked our interest. We then want to see what we can create with it and then explore further possibilities. That's exactly what happened to me. I got moved from a React project into a Vue.js project. I had never worked with Vue in my life. I think I might have heard the phrase on a YouTube ad somewhere, but I wasn't entirely sure what it was. Not only that, I was told that I'll be assessed. I'll need to write a little to-do app, and I will be assessed within a week. Have fun. Oops, was initially my first reaction. How am I going to maintain my level of output on a framework that I've never used before? Here I'm coming from a React space where I'm comfortable and I'm quite good at, and I see myself as somewhat of a wizard, into a total noob status with a new framework. So I did what every developer does. We put the kettle on and we make a cup of coffee. I then sat down and I immediately started researching. And I was immediately set at ease simply just by reading through some of the examples that the Vue.js documentation offered me. The setup wasn't too intense, and I probably could make use of the CLI. Within a day, I had my to-do app up and running. And so immediately, I learned a little bit more about something. I was able to create something. How am I going to explore further possibilities with this little to-do app? Well, I decided to integrate with an open source third-party library API to make it somewhat of a CRUD application. Why do that for a to-do app? It was part of the requirements of my assessment, so that answers that. So if we think back to 2020, I think we all kind of pull this face. It was not a good year, not really. And then, of course, whenever leaving to go to the grocery store, we all kind of felt like Arnie, we will be back, hopefully. And then if that wasn't enough, we all kind of participated in apocalypse bingo from our homes, and we figured out that artificial intelligence was learning how to evolve by itself. So why can't I do the same thing? Why can't I evolve by myself? And that is exactly what I decided to do. So unfortunately, I'm not one of the people in lockdown that figured out how to bake bread or crochet a blanket. Instead, I decided to get in touch with old friends to see what they were keeping themselves busy with. Because work isn't enough. So I actually ran into an old high school friend, and it was quite interesting for me to find out that they are also using Vue.js with the software that they are writing. And I figured that is so interesting, that is so weird. I haven't necessarily, outside of our industry or outside of the comfort zone where you find yourself, it's very rare that you run into someone using the same thing as you, unknowingly. Another buzzword that came up between my circle of friends was something that I had absolutely no interest in. And this was things like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and all of that nonsense. But I figured, okay, well, A, I need to either get aboard the train in order to continue communicating with my friends, or B, I needed to find new friends. And that's quite hard to do during lockdown. So off to Google we went. And some of the buzzwords that immediately came up was blockchain, Telos, and an anchor wallet. So in short, what is blockchain? Well, blockchain collects sets of user information, information, not user information, sorry. It collects sets of information, also known as blocks, and each of those blocks contain a certain number of transactions. Okay, not tricky. Then Telos, which I'm going to give you the old phrase, which is way cooler than what it actually is. So it was a phrase initially used by Aristotle to explain the inherent purpose of a person or a thing, kind of like the notion of an end goal. Quite interesting. Telos, in what I'm going to show you today, is just another form of like token-based crypto. And then, of course, there's an anchor wallet, which is an open source wallet that enables me to do a certain number of transactions. So how did I go about my journey? Well, I didn't necessarily want to spend too much time focusing on what it would look like. I was more interested in what am I learning out of this? I mean, I'm a front-end developer. I can make it look pretty if I needed to, but I'm not necessarily design-orientated. But how can I actually visualize what's happening on the blockchain? So someone on the internet decided to send me this. It says, yo, dog, here you like Vue. So I built this Vue app so you can build Vue with Vue. So I then got a better Vue by doing this. So how exactly did I get started by my train station? Well, obviously I read up on Telos. It's a little open source token-based crypto, nothing too complicated about that. Got my anchor wallet set up. But the last resource is what I'm excited about. It's a Quasar open source user interface template written in Vue.js, which is not overwhelming at all. I don't know how many of us, whenever we've cloned something from GitHub, immediately either wants to pull out our hair or we need to read through the README a little bit more than the average person to figure out exactly how to start that bad boy up. So nothing too complicated here. So let me show you what this looks like. So on first glance, initially after downloading my template, I am greeted with a really nice user screen, after running all the things and dependencies and whatever. Very simple, was set up in about 20 minutes. The only thing that was time consuming was figuring out how exactly to create my little token, as well as integrating that with my wallet. So because I didn't really have a lot of knowledge about that, the setup was a bit of a headache, but not anything over an hour. So off my first glance, I don't have to worry about writing any of the logging functionality. This guy literally did everything for me. Because I made use of an Anchor wallet, I can then simply go there, launch that, allow that. It's going to ask me to validate. Okay, cool. And immediately I'm logged in. I have a really nifty menu bar. If I wanted to customize that, I could. And for now, we're just going to send some fake crypto, if you will, to my friend. And you can see I'm sending Ultra. So I wanted to go with UltraMal for today, but unfortunately, usernames are always taken. So we'll just, and Ultra Melissa is just way too long, so we'll just send some Ultra coins. And we'll just say that this is a test, or we can say, please work, because we're in front of people. There we go. This will then ask me to sign that transaction. So what I'm showing you is something known as a DApp, or a decentralized application. And when we look at blockchain and where that's headed in that industry, they tend to refer to it as a DeFi, which is a decentralized finance app. But what blew my mind about this is that I could download something in Vue.js. Oh, disclaimer, this is not part of the UI template. This is just a little link that I used using npm install so that I could actually show you what that transaction looks like. So it's just a little block explorer. And there you can see I was able to send some Ultra Melissa to my friend. Cool, cool, cool. Nothing too complicated about that. Now, for the fun part, the view part. No masks were required during this demo. Okay, so if we take a look at the Vue.js project that we were able to download, the README, not overwhelming at all. This guy kept it under 50 lines of code. And this is just kind of that if I wanted to deploy this somewhere or add extra configuration to it, I can do. Because it's Vue, it's highly customizable, it's flexible. Then on the left-hand side, or as part of my file explorer, you can see everything is immediately structured. So very much like what you would kind of see under a React project, but it's not as overwhelming. I can immediately see where are my components, where are my views, where's my router situated. So to give you a quick indication, not having to change any code, and please don't yell at me for having commented out code, it wasn't needed for today's demo. Okay, so immediately, it's not overwhelming. I'm literally importing something because there's a little bit of setup already done. If I wanted to go and add an additional view, I would come into this file and just make sure that it routes correctly. If we take a look at the transfer page that I showed you, it's safe, it's structured, it's fast, it's various, and it's easy to learn. Immediately, structure in terms of I have my template and I have my script. In my script, I will do all my imports. And all I needed to do here is make sure that my getters and setters are correct. I'm using the right Anchor wallet, and I am able to do what I need to do. Just need to make sure that I'm signing my transaction by calling the API. So why bother to tell you and show you all of this? What exactly does it mean to you? Well, it's more to challenge you. I want to see what you can pull off in Vue.js. What type of project can you deliver or even integrate with at this stage? Using a framework that's only sitting on version 3? Let me know how frequently you need to make sure that your dependencies are up to date without anything breaking. Vue.js has been a game changer for me, and I'm hoping that it can offer you the same. Try and integrate it into an existing project, or even take a concept that your friends are constantly talking about and try and build something with it. Thank you.